Hello, everyone, and welcome back to joining us to reading The Bone Witch by Rin Chupeco. I own this copy. It is a paperback version. If you have this version and want to follow along with us, we are on page 40. We're reading the last little snippet of chapter 4, and then we will start reading chapter 5. Did you like Neve? I asked. The girl sat and stared at the ocean from underneath the bones of a monster long dead, for there is a reason they call this place the Sea of Skulls. Water swirled around her ankles and stained the bottom of her dress the color of rusted blood. The skeletal monster loomed around above her, its remains an arch against the hot sun that scored the black earth around them. I remembered the elephant-like Devea she had slain mere feet from where I stood, staring out at the world through unseeing eyes with loops of viscera halfway out its stomach. I held my breath, but no foul odors wafted from the spot. No flies buzzed from where its carcass used to lie. Despite the blazing heat, I see no maggots combing the earth for flesh. Only the bones from other monsters remained, dead monuments, offerings to the sea. No, I found the people strange. I found them suspicious of all those who don't look and act like them. Doubtless, they held the same opinions of me, but for the opposite reason. You came from Dropt. You understand fully the tyranny of the old guard, the inflexibility of the ruling class. The Begories of Neve entertain more liberties. A Drakotha might kill an Asha and believe it only follows the wills of God. A Nevian will claim the higher ground and preach clemency, but kill when no one else sees. The Runeberry trade influenced Merkwick's beliefs, but the rest of Odala takes its cues from its capital city, even Nightcross. But the world will always look different when you open your eyes to what you previously refused to see. It was the same for you, wasn't it? When King Adil outlawed the songs that made you famous everywhere else, and they took you from your mother's house to languish in his dungeons for 3 months. How did you know that? From above us, the skeletal beast watched, knowing. She gestured to my heart's glass, at the colors that embedded it in out of the view. She smiled. You are easy to read. I did not like Neve, but entering that city for the first time remains one of the strangest and most exhilarating experiences of my life. Perhaps because everything felt so new. Perhaps because I was realizing how much wider the world was than the Knight's Cross-shaped one I had occupied. I never got over my dislike of crowds, though I had performed before them hundreds of times. I never liked being the center of attention, which is unusual for a Asha. But despite the people's aversion to us, I had fond memories of my first night in Neve. Why is that? In my life, I have only been attracted to 2 men. And what is even more unusual was that I met both that very same night in Neve, though not in the best circumstances. Alright, now to start chapter 5. Oh, y'all get to see a little bit of Justin in the back. Alright, chapter 5. Neve was the capital of Odala, and the celebration was in progress when Lady Michaela guided us through the winding streets, she riding on her palomino, and Fox riding behind me on a gray dapple she purchased in Merkwick. I had never seen so many people packed together in so small a space before. Knight's Cross constructed its houses according to the natural paths of the land, and so I was used to broad roads. I lived in Coin for many years, but I never grown used to the narrow, constrained lanes of busy cities like Odala. Adding to the feeling of close confinement are the groups of people who have gathered to watch noisy bands of musicians cavorting through the streets, dressed in confusing swirls of clothing and color. Some carry tambourines, while others chose drums or trumpets. All were not shy about making as much noise as possible. People built small fires around the city square and took turns leaping over them while others watched and applauded, laughing. The sight of those flames, coupled with the smallness of the spaces and the largeness of the crowds, alarmed me. I clung to my brother, fearful that the fires might spread, and that parts of the city might burn before long. Despite the heat and the smoke surrounding us, his skin was cold to the touch. They celebrate the spring equinox, Fox said, as boys and girls alike leapfrogged over the pyres, daring each other to jump higher at every turn. Fire is a cleansing tool, and to leap over it is to clean themselves of all sickness and evil in anticipation of the coming year. But we don't do this in Knight's Cross. The closest thing we have to a large fire was my father's forge, and I could only imagine his reaction should a villager elect to jump over it. Farmland is not an appropriate venue for fire building, T. I'm not sure cities are made the same way. The festivities quieted somewhat when we passed. People stopped to stare at Lady Michaela's empty hourglass and then at the silver tints of mine. They tried to melt back into the crowd to give us room, though the paths were small and gave them difficulty. Fox received a few of those stares for his lack of heart glass and for the plain silver sword at his hip, as none of the revelers wore weapons that I could see. Not for his absence of shadow, I tried to convince myself, and certainly not because they knew he was dead. Neve was nothing like Knight's Cross. It may seem ridiculous to imagine I could compare the two, but Knight's Cross was all I had ever known, and not even my books prepared me for the shock of the city. My village was simple and muted against a backdrop of forest and stones, where the forge and the gossip were the noisiest sounds. But the city of Neve wore its people for emphasis, like giant exclamation marks that walked in every street and lawyered every corner. Its citizens attired itself in bright, stunning dresses that called to the eyes. None of the women back home wore veils. It would be an awkward garment to wear when working in the fields. Some of the Nevian women wore these loosely about their persons, and others wore them coiled so tightly about their heads that I could not tell the color of their hair, or even if they had any. A few took this step further. They had on masks and long flowing robes that hid everything but their eyes. Many of the people's faces were smooth and polished, at times prettier and handsomer than they first appeared. It felt to me that there was something strange about their features. They were a little too refined and a little too contrived. Like a whetstone had given them precision, but also left them too sharp for nature to allow for. To my eyes, it was like each person wore two faces that shared the same exact space, one pressing down on top of the other, one too pretty and affected to be natural, and the other too flawed and regular to be artificial. Glamour, Lady Michaela said over her shoulder, without looking up from her book. I would later learn that it was her habit to read as she walked and to read as she rode. She had given me a book from her collection so I could do the same, but I was unused to riding horses, and a sore buttocks soon distracted me from turning the pages. The smallest of magics, harmless for the most part, it allows the people their vanities, but we Asha can see them all the same. We rode past colorful banners and vibrant pinions. The marketplace was awash with sights and smells, from the fresh, minty scent of potted plants to the tantalizing aroma of fried foods and baking bread that reminded my stomach I had nothing but a strip of beef jerky in the last few hours. Signs calling for prosperity and luck graced every door. Carts wheeled by, and children raced past older folk who bore armfuls of clothes and baskets. Occasionally a carriage would pass, too rich or ornate for its inhabitants to give us more than a second glance. I expected Lady Michaela to make for the harbor. She had told me that the fastest way to coin was to take a ship from the port of Odala and Neve, as opposed to the month-long journey it would take on land. When she rode past the street leading down to the rows of ships anchored at the dock and onto the road leading to Odala's castle, I was surprised. I shall stay at the palace for the night, at King Telemaine's request, the Asha said. It is the spring equinox, and I draw heart runes for the children of Neve every year. We'll leave at first light tomorrow and catch the earliest ship and coin. Speak up, Fox. I can see the question on your face. I do not mean to cause offense, mistress, but many Odalians consider it bad luck to offer bone witches a place to stay, even for a night. For a ruler of Odala to do so would be just disastrous in their eyes. How did you manage to convince the king? It was his idea. The royal chandler and the palace steward have been taken into his confidence. Albeit reluctantly, and no one else is aware of our housing arrangement, she smiled faintly. In case you wondered, no, I did not compel him to do it. Drawing a heart's room for so many at once is a tedious task, but I do it in gratitude to his majesty. I wasn't sure what to think of the king I deemed responsible for Fox's death, but my brother only shrugged and said that it was a soldier's life, and if they blamed the king for every cut and kill and death that they take, there would be no army left in olive kingdoms. But wouldn't that be better? I asked as we dismounted. Stable hands from the royal stable hurried forward and took the horses' reins. No armies would mean no war. Fox laughed suddenly, though his chest did not rise and fall. Silly girl, you are not yet in Asha, and you already understand the games kings and queens play. I certainly don't. The castle was open to all who came at this time of the year because, like the spring equinox, this was the custom. The people wore magic on their brows. They painted their lips scarlet with the spell's fullness and dusted their cheeks with its rouge. I could feel the enchantments woven into their clothes. Lady Michaela took her time pointing out some of the spells to me so I could commit to memory how they looked and what they felt like. Many arranged elegance in their feather bonnets and solemnity in their tailcoats. Composure adorned in lady's majestic hat. It didn't work on me. The overabundance of feathers made her look like she had assaulted an ungainly duck in the past life and wore its skin, and the thought made me giggle. Why do they do that? I asked Michaela. Why do they waste magic this way? It is the way of the rich, she replied, shrugging one silk-clad shoulder. They commission the hoteliers to spin it into their clothes and call it fashion, or have apothecaries paint their faces and call it beauty. We are village-born and do not understand the ways the city's minds work. The city rich are not like bees in a hive that work together to share honey for all. The city rich are like the jungle apes. They show off their red bottoms and beat their chests because they fear to be killed from the herd if they show weakness. Even the most inferior of roomberries can survive for this magic. So we will let them be. Is that why you don't wear magic like they do? Lady Michaela grinned at me. But I am wearing magic, little one. The difference is that it is woven so finely into Mahua that you cannot detect it. The people in this part of the city recognized her too and gave her a widest berth. I walked into the crowd with my head down and grinned, the ground suddenly more interesting to study the people. Lady Michaela was used to the silence and watched with her head thrown back and a secret smile on her lips. Fox brought up the rear and paid no attention when those standing closest shrunk back. The king and his son stood in the castle gates, welcoming visitors. King Telemaine was a large man of unexpected height. It was easier to imagine him in the smoke of battle or in the aftermath of a bloody duel, not dressed in rich satin robes of dyed purple, with a crown 2 sizes too small for his head. He had a great black beard clumped against his chin and to hide a thin, nearly lipless mouth and bright green eyes that were more shrewd than clever. His horse class was built to size, twice as large as my own, but adequate when framed against his massive chest. Beside him was a young boy a year or two older than me, wearing a smaller crown in his father's eyes. But where King Telemaine's eyes were hard and opaque jade, his son's were deep and gentle emeralds that smiled back despite his serious face. He was easily the most handsome boy I had ever met. When he caught me staring, I looked away, frantically willing my blush to fade. Lady Michaela, the king stepped forward, large hands folding over one of the ashes and hiding it from everyone's view. Thank you for coming as always. It is my pleasure as always. There is a good crowd here. How many hearts class are present? 480 in all. I started. In Knight's Cross, it would be a good year if there were more than 20 13-year-olds for the equinox. We have even less reason to delay then. The night grows old. This is my apprentice, T. Pavali and her brother Fox. I am enchanted. King Telemaine was an experienced statesman. The faintest spasm of orange flickered across his heart's glass, but only for the briefest second. I felt an irrational surge of resentment and forgot my embarrassment. No, you aren't. Both King Telemaine and Michaela turned to me. The man was curious and the Asha cautioning. I could understand his disinterest in yet another bone witch in his kingdom, but Fox was a different matter. My brother died. You told him where, and he went like a good soldier to fight and got nothing but a coffin for his troubles. Surely he deserves more than your indifference. I gave his heart glass a pointed glance, even if it is well concealed. Some of those in his routine gasped, alarmed by my frankness. Lady Michaela said nothing. The king threw his head back, revealed 2 rows of square white teeth to everyone present. I laughed aloud. Such spirit in this one. You've chosen well, Michaela. She'll grow your fangs soon enough. She shows much promise, Lady Michaela murmured. She seems to have learned to read hearts glasses with a little training. King Telemaine turned to Fox. I am grateful for the services you've rendered your kingdom, young man, and I am sorry for the situation that finds you here. I shall talk to your stewards and ensure that your family will want for nothing. It is a small compensation, but it is the least I can do. You are too kind, your majesty, Fox bowed. It was a bad business, I remember that order, but I had little choice. I could not afford to have my northern borders terrorized by some nameless creature. We never did find the Devea, but my men must have injured it, for the attack ceased soon after. What are the chances of it silking off to whatever lair it calls its own to die? With much respect to your majesty, Fox said, with his usual gravity, I hope it did not. The king laughed even harder. I see that you have your hands full with these siblings, Michaela. Fire and calm, these 2. Water and flash. Much like my sons. This is Prince Cance. The boy smiled at me and I felt my cheeks prickle with heat again. It is my honor to meet you, Asha. He bowed low and his heart glass swung in the movement. Like his father's, it was set in silver and adorned with intricate workings of the royal family crest along its edges, a lion's silhouette embezzled against the sun. I am an Asha. I am not an Asha, I stammered. How could a simple smile work such wonders to my heart? An apprentice, Lady Michaela interrupted, taking pity on me. Due to take up her novice in Enkyo. But a bone witch all the same, eh? The king winked at me. It has been a rare year. The first new bone witch in decades. 2 of you from Ondala. When many other kingdoms are forced to do without. Doesn't Estera only have the one old crone left, Michaela? Of course, we don't have Knight's Heart Forger. But he's old and getting on in years. Heart Forger? I asked before I could stop myself. King Telemaine gestured to my heart's glass with a thick hand. The heart's glass are silver white like yours, but they don't wave magic about like you do, only fire up memories and forge themselves into new ones. 2 others approached the king, one a royal counselor judging from the robes he wore, and the other a young boy in a brown cloak and hood. I read the blue and yellow palpitations on the older man's heart glass, an irregular heartbeat of fright. The others were easier to discern. He was a beet red with anger directed at us. I didn't bother to look at their faces, keeping my eyes on the counselor's heart glass instead. Your Majesty, he stuttered, we shouldn't keep the children waiting. You cannot spend so much time on these witch folk, the man's heart glass seemed to whisper. What would the people think, seeing their king consorting with these pariahs? He is right, Lady Michaela laid a firm hand on my arm. We had best get started. 480 children are waiting. Kings and queens may be let off with ungracious behavior, she murmured once we were all alone. Bone witches may not. Speak in that manner to the king or to anyone else in this palace, and I will box your ears and have you clean the city outhouses for a month. We are welcomed in most of Odella's because of his generosity and are outcast without. I promise, I said meekly, because Lady Michaela was the kind who carried out anything she threatened. If our time at the Devea Mound was any indication, what did he mean by heart forgers? She tapped on my heart's glass. A different magic, but with the same color. They're of more use to the people with bone witches than bone witches, so they aren't as reviled. They can take memories and break them into bits and pieces, distill them down into potions and spells, and build them back up into new hearts, bright and counterfeit, so that even we can't tell one heartbeat from the other. Fortunately, some artificial hearts cost more than the kingdom, and so few people bother. But why? For noble reasons and for horrible reasons. Give your heart to the wrong person and they can abuse that trust, and there are spells to prevent you from drawing one new. When you have enough enemies, it is sometimes necessary to speed up what nature did not intend. The strongest spells require memories. These There are many people who wish to forget, and there are many rich enough to pay for the privilege. But that's terrible. People can be terrible, T. Lady Michaela's empty heart glass winked against the light as she turned away, and I wondered what in the Asha's past was responsible for making her so sad. Only one Asha was necessary for the equinox ritual, so I stood aside, watching from the sidelines as Lady Michaela attended to her task. As her apprentice, I was given a spot among the most junior of the king's staff, on the edge of the crowd, but able to watch the proceedings without looking over everyone else's head. Fox, not quite as fortunate, stood somewhere in the middle of the group. It did not matter. I could feel him there, and that was enough. We were part of a large audience looking on, where at the center of the town square, a group of children around my age stood expectantly. They were dressed in their prettiest and most expensive clothes and held their empty heart glasses in their hands. After presenting themselves to the king, the boys and girls waited as Lady Michaela moved down the line, tracing runes as she went. Each heart glass case seemed to me even more elaborate than the next. I could feel poise and composure, incantations woven into the dress of one girl, so that the crowd marveled even as she fidgeted and squirmed in her lace and satin vest. One boy dug a finger into his nose with undue diligence. The spells on him muted the action. It was simpler back in Knight's Cross, I thought. We were too poor to afford but to behave. Behind me, a chorus sang, and instruments were played, but unseen hands. Lady Michaela continued, fingers working at the air, and the people watched, their faces enchanted, to hide their disdain of the Bone Witch, to all but those who could see through the magic and through them. They say you can bring back the dead. I looked behind me. A boy stood there, his hostility obvious. They say you can bring back the dead, he repeated. Well, can you? Most of the people in Neve had gone out of their way to ignore me, so his pointed decision took me by surprise. It depends. Do you require raising? It did not appear to be the answer the boy wanted. Can you or can't you? A black cloak, many sizes too big, swallowed him up, hid his heart glass from my view. I could not see the color of his hair, could only see the lower half of his face and one of his eyes, which was hooded in gray. If only I could see his heart, I thought. And well, whatever he had reasons to be smug, or whether he was merely stupid, or at least he did not smell of spells or incantations, none woven into his clothes to mask his disgust. I'm a bone witch. Of course I can. My father says bone witches are demon children, the boy persisted. They curse the healthy and blight the sane. No other magic would touch them because they sell their hearts to the dark. That's how they raise dead men, soulless as they are. Bone witches do not sell their hearts. The boy's eyes narrowed. Because you have no hearts to give, the lot of you. So you take others for your own and bleed them dry. You grow the dead by the armies, and if we don't keep you in check, you will let them overrun us. That's not true. I grew angry with each word. I had done nothing for this boy to single me out. You hate us for nothing more than prejudice. The boy pulled his cloak even tighter around him. I know your tricks. My father told me all about your kind, and if you can't see my heart's glass, then you can't curse me. I don't want to curse you. That was only half the truth, because I was angry and did wish I knew how to shut him up. From inside his hood, the boy's face hardened. Your kind killed my mother, he snapped. He turned and fled back into the confines of the crowd, but not before his heavy cloak shifted and I saw his heart glass. It blazed back at me for an instant. A bright, tipped, shimmering silver, and then it was gone, lost in a maze of people, and that boy along with it. She had changed her hua in the interim. This time it was a deep blue to mimic the depths of the sea. A pattern of waves made up half of the dress before tapering off as it drifted downward, speckled in areas with orange-colored carp and silver-backed trout. The dragon was again a prominent design here, but parts of its body remained hidden behind her waist wrap, which was tinted in turquoise and overlaid with a peach and gray seashells, so only its head and front legs stuck out. Its eyes were made of black agate, and they peered out at me with its disproportioned snout raised, tusk on display. Its hind legs jutted out of the bottom of the thick wrap, tail ending at the long, sharp spike. To complement her hua, she wore an assortment of jeweled pins in her hair, commonly seen in royal courts. The gems dangled from long sticks pushed in her hair, braided and secured by silk bands and fashioned from aquamarine and fire opal beads. I have made 28 visits to the Achaean oracle. This announcement piqued my curiosity. I was aware of the Anaki's oracle's importance to the Asha of the Willows, but the women are only required to visit her for the most important matters. When she begins a relationship with a patron, for example, or when she pledges service to a king or noble. The average Asha makes only 2 visits to the temple during her time as an apprentice, she said, sensing my next question. The first to present herself when she comes to take residence at the Willows, and the second when she is about to debut a full-fledged Asha. Until she finds a benefactor, she is no longer required to announce herself to the oracle. Unfortunately, the oracle had something very different in mind with me. And that will be the end of chapter 5. Well, that was very fun and enticing. And we will meet again in our next video.